if I take offense to anything that you say, that does not make you toxic. You're either a toxic person or you're not. My feelings about you do not make you a toxic person.
Right.
So that, I think, really needs to be understood, or else this conversation is all for naught.
Welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about toxic people and how do we respond to them in a godly way. I'm sure we've all had someone in our lives at some point in time that have taken more from our relationship with them than added. So we're going to talk about what do we do in those circumstances. So Jared, I know we were just talking, you had some thoughts around toxicity in general in regards to ministry in the church, in our culture. What comes to your mind when you think about toxic people?
Yeah, I think the first thing, Bill, that I see, in the culture, even in church culture, in some respects, in some circles, especially though outside in the culture, there's a misunderstanding or a blatant ignorance or ignoring of actual facts. And what I mean by that is, if you have a different opinion than I do, a different belief system, religion, a different political stance or viewpoint, different way that you parent your children, a different way that you drive your car, different way that you have your diet set out for yourself, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You can be passionate about that. You can go to marches. You can do protesting. You can be an advocate or an activist or an apologist or an evangelist. If I take offense to anything that you say, that does not make you toxic. You're either a toxic person or you're not. My feelings about you do not make you a toxic person.
Right.
So that, I think, really needs to be understood, or else this conversation is all for naught. So we need to understand how to differentiate between someone who's very passionate about their beliefs and their worldviews and their whatever that may be,
right,
and how it makes me feel does not make you toxic. So we have to understand that. And now, if you, again, and I'm sure you've got some examples in some of your content, but if you turn to violence or you are other things that would actually define a toxic person that we'll talk about today, that in my mind is different.
Yeah, of course, there's a headline in the news lately of Charlie Kirk. And I said this before we started recording, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. I think the individual who shot him is an ultimately over-the-top, extreme version of someone who's toxic. And we'll get into why that's, and we're not doing to sensationalize this episode or clickbait, but it really is a practical example, an extreme practical example of what toxicity can lead to. But
our thoughts and prayers are with
absolutely
his family,
absolutely,
for sure. It's devastating news, but we're going to carry on and talk about Christ and talk about
a godly response to toxic people. Yeah,
and this was actually on our agenda before this happening.
Yeah, we decided to talk about this over a month ago, I think.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I think before we get into too far of how to respond to someone who's toxic, we may need to make the distinction between someone who's toxic and maybe someone who's just difficult.
That's true too. Yeah.
So in your mind, what delineates someone who is toxic from someone who's maybe just being difficult in a season, for a season, or at a point, or in a conversation, or what have you?
I think, and this is going to sound cliche and Christianese, but I think the answer is sinful. I really do. I think a person who is toxic is a person who has a loose tongue. I think a person who is toxic is a person who is not gentle, right? Is not humble.
Yes.
So the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. If they're the opposite of those things, usually that ends up with a person who is toxic. So that would be how I would define that. You can have a person who is difficult to deal with because they have the extreme opposite personality that you do. And, maybe they, for instance, maybe you're more of a person who is quiet and a little more introverted. They may be extroverted. They may be overly extroverted.
Right.
And that may just kind of rub you the wrong way.
Sensory overload or something like that. Yeah.
Or it could be that you have, a family member who just wants to be around all the time and is always popping by the house and they're not listening, and you need to have like a sit down with them and you've done it multiple times. Like, hey, you can't just pop in. We've got things going on. We've got, they're difficult, right? But that doesn't, or you have somebody who's always questioning the teachings at church. Like they want to sit down and it's every week that they want to talk to you about the content. And, did you think about this point? And well, I think really we should do ministry this way or we should do that. And they're just difficult, but that doesn't make them toxic. But if there's gossip in there on their lips, or if there's a mean spirit, or they're angry, or they're influencing others away from purity in any way, that in my mind would be toxic.
I think you hit it right on the nail on the head when you talked about fruits of the Spirit. Colossians 3. But also just before the fruits of the Spirits are the fruits of the flesh, right? And that's where kind of my mind goes when you talk about toxic people. They're just there, right? They're not moving. They're not changing. They're not developing. Now, in context, we're talking about a spiritual aspect. But outside, people who don't have the Holy Spirit can still be very healthy emotionally and not show any toxicity, be wonderful, amazing people. We both know people like that. Yeah. But we can also see people who are toxic, who are just in this kind of mindset of my way or the highway.
They're disagreeable. Meaning they can't even agree to disagree.
Right.
Like Gary Chapman in his book, Things I Wish I Knew Before I Got Married, he talks about, how to have disagreements and conflict, without arguing and everything blowing up in your marriage. Right. He talks about like there's three different things. Like we can meet on in the middle, which is we both give up a little bit of what we wanted to do, and meet in the middle somewhere, or we can meet on your side. Right? So really there's only two because the other one will be meet on my side. And he says there are times when you're going to like sacrifice everything and meet on your spouse's side. And there's times you're going to, meet in the middle. But a person who can't do any of these things, in my mind, is a person close to toxicity, right? They're disagreeable. They can't agree to even disagree. So that would be another distinction I would make.
They're controlling.
Controlling is a good one. That's a good one.
They have to have... It has to be done their way. It has to be said their way. You have to agree with them. Yeah. There's no spirit of being teachable to change in mind or change an attitude or change a direction. Yeah. And when they're controlling to that nth degree, then they're falling into that toxicity that I think we're talking about.
I think so, yeah. And it's hard too because I know I defined it right out of the gate as, sinfulness or actions that are right. But we are talking about a pretty gray area in here of like there's a line somewhere. Yeah. But I'm not going to judge somebody's heart. I'll judge their actions in my own head. Right. Of course, we do that with each other as Christians, right. And sometimes I got to come alongside you and keep each other accountable. But there's some sort of I think a playing field where it's this person's difficult. Man, that they might be toxic. I don't know. You know what I mean? Yes. And then there's like the people that are just blatantly. Correct. So that's the hardest part about this whole conversation is in your mind and in my mind, there's this scale that a broad scale of people that we deal with on a daily basis. And where do they fall?
Yeah. And for the purposes of this video, we want to talk about the ones that are on the far end of the toxicity scale and how we respond to that. Because like I said, I think those are ones that are controlling. It's their way, no other way. Yeah. And we've both seen people leave church over topics that
or quit jobs over it.
Yeah, right. That they ended up being rather toxic. And they're usually someone who's been wounded by something from the get-go or hardened heart, right, is another way we can word that. Yeah. But there's also this idea of when you're in kind of a relationship with someone that may be toxic or blatantly is toxic, one of the clear pieces of evidence is that they take more out of the relationship than they give. In fact, there's very little they give to the relationship. Right. You walk away more exhausted, and they walked away enthralled because because the more you feed the toxicity, the more powerful because that's who and what they are. That's the fruit they're bearing.
Yeah.
And as they bear more of that fruit,
Yeah.
the more empowered they're going to feel.
Yeah. And they also cause fear in other people.
Absolutely.
If you have a toxic spouse, husband or wife, there's a fear that's associated with that a lot of times. I'm afraid to be in that person's presence.
Yeah.
Right. Or I'm afraid of how they will, I have to walk on eggshells because of how they might react.
Or if back when we used to ring doorbells,
Yeah.
right? If someone rings your doorbell and you like duck away from the window, shh, quiet. Then that person might be someone you would consider toxic to you, right?
Yeah,
Maybe.
could be, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So the other thing I think about toxic people is they just love to hate.
True.
Not intentionally. They're not going around, oh, I'm enjoying hating and I'm going to, but just that's the result that's coming across is how they talk, inspire,
Internet trolls.
Exactly. You and I talked about this before we started this podcast. We can't start this podcast without being willing to respond or decide not to respond because internet trolls will happen.
Right.
When you have a successful platform on social media, you will get trolls.
Yeah, and we are hardly successful.
But we're growing. We're getting there.
We're a small, humble beginning platform here. But and I get it.
If you're a boxer and you don't want to get hit, don't get in the ring.
Right.
Right. So going into this, we had to understand
you could deal with this.
It's part of the job is we're going to take hits, right? And that's just the nature of doing a podcast or being on social media.
Right. Yeah, having a public platform of some sort.
Yeah. So I think controlling kind of a murderous spirit. They just kind of suck everything.
Yeah, anger comes to my mind a lot.
They kill reputations. They kill friendships. They kill work environments. They kill churches. They kill peace.
Very angry, unhappy people.
Yeah. And then they just love to hate. Yeah. Pride.
Pride's a big one.
I think pride's kind of maybe the source.
I mean, in the biblical theological sense of the term, pride is the cause of all sin. Right, that's
root of all evil.
Right, it's kind of the root of all evil. So, yeah, you can always track back attitudes of dissension and, like you just mentioned, controlling and in that sense back to pride. So, yeah, I would say you're right on that one too.
Isn't pride kind of when we have too much pride? There's a lack of a willingness to be submissive to someone else. Specifically someone in authority, God. Right. Our boss, our spouse, our pastor, whatever form of someone who has that authority, we're just like, no, I'm right. I have the right answer. You need to agree with me or go home.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So in your mind then, how do you deal with this?
So I break this into two there's toxic people that maybe in a work environment, we have no choice. We're going to rub elbows.
We have to be with,
in ministry, in work, or whatever it is that they're in our circle. We're going to bump into them even though we don't want to. It's going to have to happen. What do we do with those people? And then there are those where we can just walk away from. And we'll talk about, I think, Jesus and how he walked away from people. And there's lots of examples, and we'll talk about that. So for those that we have to run into, I think it's clear boundaries. You have to have a set of boundary of, if it's a work environment, you're engaged with them as long as you need to accomplish that work. And you do it respectfully, you do it kindly, you do it compassionately, right? But if they're so closed-minded, so hard-hardened, they're not going to change or soften or become teachable. You have those clear boundaries more so to protect yourself because the soil isn't fertile. Yeah. So you limit the time you spend with them, you limit the topics you engage with them on, and you limit the location of where you're willing to engage them. You just set these healthy boundaries.
Yeah. I would add to that too. There's a couple different things that come to my mind.
Yeah.
A soft answer turns away wrath, which is biblical. Yeah. And that's actually worked quite a bit in my own life. When you're dealing with somebody who's a little bit hot, they're a little bit angry, they're like this, quite often. They have this reputation. a lot of times a soft answer turns away wrath, but that soft answer doesn't have to be weak. And I'll give you an example of what I mean, because it also includes posture, right, and firmness.
Right.
So I can be soft with my answer, but my posture can be strong, and I can be firm. My stance can be firm. And I remember some years ago, I had a father who came into my office pretty hot. He was pretty upset, pretty angry. I had to make a phone call to the authorities because of a confidential thing that was said to me that required me to, by law, make a phone call. And a day later, I'm sitting in my office, and he comes in very irate. I'm not a very big individual. I think I'm 5'6" and change, 160 pounds maybe. And so I knew what was happening because I recognized him. I did not know this individual very well. I just knew that who he was, and I had a couple of conversations with him, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes max in these conversations. Came in and started in. He was very upset. So I made sure as soon as he reached the office door that I stood up. My stance was firm. I tried to eye level best I could, let him speak for a few moments, and then I engaged. And I was soft with my answer, but I was firm with my stance and my words. So I think it worked, and he kind of de-escalated a little bit because he saw that I was soft with my approach, but I was firm with my stance. And so he realized he wasn't going to get anywhere. Now, that doesn't always work, but that is what comes to my mind because it's the first biblical approach.
Right.
And I think
it's in Proverbs, right?
Yeah, and I think you can do that in the workplace environment that you said.
Absolutely.
You have a person who's
Absolutely.
like, blah, 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 and you can kind of give a soft answer. And sometimes that de-escalates the room.
It does.
You being the one to give a soft approach, so the arguing or the
It works
contention.
more often than not, and I've used it at work several times.
Yeah.
But like you said, Proverbs aren't formulas where if you do it step 1, step 2, it's always going to work out. Right. But they're guidelines in generalities. Yeah. But it's powerful.
And the second thing I would say, and you might be able to add to this in dealing with this said situation, is be the person where this attitude comes to die. Because a lot of toxicity is contagious. You can find yourself, think of gossip, for instance.
Yeah.
And people who are toxic because they're loose-tongued, they're always gossiping, and they always have something mean to say about somebody else behind their back, or they're always passing on information they have no business passing on. Be the person where those things come to die.
Yeah.
And I think people will realize real quick your stance is firm, your posture is strong, and your answer is soft. I'm simply not going to engage with that.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to go back to Charlie Kirk for a moment. Like I said earlier, I think the person who pulled that trigger and people like that are the extreme example of toxic people who are ready to force their viewpoint or take out those who are disagreeing with them, right? And that can happen, verbal assassinations, that can happen in workplace relationships, that can happen to much lower degrees, right? But there's such a closed-mindedness that there's a lack of them to be able to see anything else. So as much as we do everything right and godly, there's the great potential of this person still may not respond to that, or that may even harden their heart further, right? And that causes more of a reaction than we would want. So just a cautionary tale. So setting boundaries. And I think in the last circumstance, when it's a relationship where someone you're not going to see on a regular basis, you walk away.
Yeah.
You walk away. I like a lot of my material and my notes come from a book by Gary Thomas. Awesome book. If you're a reader, I really highly encourage you to get and read this book. And the book is simply titled When to Walk Away. Gary Thomas, When to Walk Away. And he talks a lot of great advice of what to do. And one thing he summarizes in, if there's no conviction, then no counsel, right? If there's no conviction or opening that there might be some other perspective, attitude, adjustment needed, then that person is so closed-minded, he's not going to bother with counsel. And he gives some great examples in there that talks about that. And he goes to 2 Timothy 2:12, or excuse me, 2:2. 2 Timothy 2:2, which says, "The things which you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." So that they're faithful and they're able, right? So is the person you're engaging with, is there just this opening, their ability to respond to the truth that's being spoken?
So you're actually talking in the context of, toxic people don't have to stay in that attitude. You could
Correct.
actually reach them and help in some capacity.
Potentially. But if they're not responsive, then they're the extreme end of that spectrum of toxicity we talked about. And that's when we walk away. One thing Gary does in his book, and one thing I encourage you, go through the book of Luke and write down every time Jesus walks away, someone who's closed-minded or someone closed-minded walks away from Jesus. Mm-hmm. It's so freeing to know that it's okay. Our Lord and Savior did it, and it's okay for us to do it when it's that extreme situation.
Yeah.
So, and that's hence the title of his book, When to Walk Away.
Yeah. In the extreme situations too, we've given this disclosure on this podcast, but if you're in a situation, man or woman, boy or girl, and there's, physical abuse or verbal,
absolutely,
right, and extreme emotional abuse, things like that, get out. Don't stay. And so that is obviously get out, walk away. Seek help if you need it.
Thank you for bringing that.
Do not have to stay in that kind of a situation. Yeah. You should not stay.
And kind of bringing this home, one thing I'd also remind us is that toxic people aren't the enemy. They're prisoners in the spiritual war.
They need rescue.
And they need to be rescued just like we needed to be rescued. So the distinction and the challenge for all of us, and I'm still growing in this myself, and it'll be a challenge for you as well, is to walk away, but in such a way that you can still pray for them and care on them from a distance. Yeah. But it's just that in such a circumstance, they're taking more out of you, and there's no real opportunity for them to be teachable and grow from your interaction with them.
And that's a categories of impact conversation.
It is.
Whether you can influence somebody, whether you cannot, the three, categories of impact. There's things that you can control and influence, and then there's things that you can influence but not control, and then there's things you can neither influence or control. So identifying, is this something I can influence, is going to be important to understand.
Yeah.
Whether you should stay and engage.
Yeah.
If there's no option for control or influence itself, that's a walk away moment.
That's a great call out. That's really practical. Yeah, so category 1, you can control and influence. Category 2, you can influence but not control. Right. Category 3, you can't do either.
So if you're in 1 and 2, you're in pretty good shape.
Okay, yeah.
If you're in 3,
not
going to work.
And this is a pattern. If someone's showing this pattern time and time again, then they can't be influenced at all. And of course, we don't want to control anybody to begin with. We just want to be a godly influence in their lives. If there's no influence.
Yeah. And the other thing too, and I'll just throw this out there because this is where a lot of people are drama queens, okay? Mm-hmm. Meaning they will remain connected via social media for the drama. Yeah. And I don't mean to be a jerk, but that will affect you in your daily life, and you will notice it. So if you're a person who's like, I can't believe this, but perhaps not go on and see their posts or read their shenanigans on social media. Maybe just unfollow them. Maybe it's as simple as I need to walk away from social media, because I'm getting sucked into the drama. And everybody's going back and forth, and it's affecting how I deal with myself and my family. And
it pours into the church.
Just walk away.
Yeah, those attitudes pour into the church.
In fact, when we teach the kids, and this is, some people are upset with me about, for this, but the whole bullying thing online, okay, I want to show you physically how you deal with that. We're done, right? And surround yourself with people, real people, face-to-face who love and support you. This doesn't mean anything. You can use the internet and not have social media. So that is another way, I think, for young people to understand, I'm surrounded by toxicity. Okay, well, yes, in school sometimes there's a few
No
of those.
choice,
There's
right?
no choice.
Yep.
But are you also coming home? Are you also on Snapchat and TikTok and all this other stuff? And you're getting the toxicity there too? Because if that's the case, then you're getting this stuff like 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
So I would just simply say close it and walk away.
Yeah, and brothers and sisters in Christ, how we behave matters, right?
For those who aren't watching, I closed my iPad. Yeah. That was my example, if you're listening.
Yeah. How we behave matters by the love we have for one another. Those outside the church will know that we are his. Mm-hmm. So how we want to do our very best to make sure this toxicity isn't leaking into our churches. And here's kind of a guideline I use. And this could be like, as Christians, we like to argue, infant baptism, no adult baptism, no pre-trib, post, no. Yeah. And we are, and you preached on this a while back, focusing on the essentials rather than what isn't essential to the faith.
Yeah.
And what comes down for me, differences are differences. Divisions are decisions.
Yeah.
What decision are you making?
Right.
Differences are differences, but divisions is a decision. Yeah. So be cautious and careful of how you behave, because how we behave matters. It reflects on our Father.
It does.
So.
Absolutely. People either see Christ in you or they see a lack of.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, thanks so much for listening. Please drop a comment if you've ever had a toxic relationship encounter. We'd love to hear about it in our comments. Otherwise, if you got a prayer request, we'd love to pray for you. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.
Bye.